So here we are in Maya now. There's a few things I want to do before we actually create and there's a few things I want to do before I import the camera data and the Alembic file into Maya. We want to match up our Nuke settings to Maya. So if you remember, I had frame 50 to frame 200. I'll set the timeline up there. The frame rate in Nuke, remember, was 25 frames per second, so this is really important. The frame rates match up perfectly. Otherwise, the slightest kind of frame offset can really mess up the tracking. So we need to make sure, again, that's just 200. If you do change the frame rate, just bear in mind the timeline might change because of the FPS. So that's that. Another thing we can do is just come into the render, the actual Maya settings, the main ones, and just have a look at the working units. That should be fine. I think it might come in a little bit small, the camera, but it doesn't actually matter. Next thing we're going to do is create a project, because we're going to have bits of things coming in from all different directions. It's important. You should always create a Maya project whenever you start anything new in Maya anyway. So let's just create a project. I'm just going to put that into my compositing. Getting 3D tracking now. Tracking tutorial. Yeah. Accept. So now we can go put, let's just check the Alembic is plugged in. So if you come up to cache here, you should be able to see this where it says Alembic cache and all the import and export settings. If that's not there before we get started, let's just show you how to plug that in. So if you come to Windows, Settings and Preferences, Plugin Manager, and it should be at the top here, so it should be ABC Export Bundle, ABC Import Bundle. I don't think you need the bullet, that's to do with some kind of simulation stuff. But for this, we just need especially the import. So just make sure they're ticked there, and then when you close that, it should come up, oops, here like mine. So when I go to import, it'll take me to the Alembic cache folder, so just test that before we go. So I exported my table track, so I'm just going to pop that into the right folder. And into my tracking, cache, Alembic, drop. So I've got my Alembic cache there. You can see actually previewing on the Mac. Cool. So yeah, it's in my Maya folder here. Important you, so you go find your camera track, .abc, the export from Nuke, bring it to the cache, Alembic, and drop it in there. If your Alembic cache folder hasn't been created yet, just make one in Maya. It'll make one by default when you actually start doing something, but it's not actually there at first, but you can just create one and then pop it in. Alembic. Cool, so then let's import that in now. Open cache, import Alembic. This is where it's important you've done all the timeline stuff first, because that's going to drop it on in there. Import, and it's come up quite small, but it doesn't matter at all that it's small. And if we press play, we've got that same camera that we had in Nuke, and you can actually look through it. Turn on the resolution gate there, and we're looking at the cube on our table. To make sure it's all worked and set up, just make sure you've gone back to the first frame, frame 50. We can actually import the video that we used and use it as a video player. So if you're looking through the camera, so make sure you're in camera 2, go to View, Image Plane, Import Movie, and you could put your movie file. This is the original movie file that we used, so the one I've used is this one, I think. Import. And we can actually just scrub through. So you'll notice there it's a bit off. It doesn't actually start for a few frames here. Look at it, it's like not working. To get this to work better, you can export a like a proxy video. So you can do a really low resolution video. Just put it through Media Encoder. So you've got a really low resolution video that will actually play back better in my help you out here. But one thing we do need to do is just change some settings on this video plate. And we need to do a frame offset. So actually at frame 50, we want it to start at frame 50 instead, don't we? Doing. There we go. So that you can see that's nicely tracked on the table, nice and steady. So now what we can do, in the next step I'll show you how to bring in your own geometry or your own model, and then I'll show you how we can go about lighting and rendering it to make it look good and match the lighting in the scene. So I'll see you in the next. So what we're going to do now is, now that we've got our cube all loaded in on the camera, we're going to actually rebuild this table so we've got something we can catch the shadows on, because one of the important things to make something look like it's in the scene is having the shadow in particular casting on the table. So what we can do is actually, in some cases we might need to rebuild the whole table. In CGI, if say we've got a character interacting with it, or kind of going climbing behind here or something. But we're just going to rebuild the tabletop, so I'm going to make a cube. Scale that down. It's going to come out of the camera a second. This is why it was great to have our proxy cube in here. Something as a reference. So I know now if I just put that there, and now I don't move it ever in the y-axis, I know that it's going to be sitting on the table correctly. So let's look back through the camera. So it's good to model this from the camera perspective. So let's just rotate the cube. And remember, I'm not going to move up and down. I'm just going to move left to right, scaling left to right as well. I'm going to go on wireframe to do this, so I can get a better view. Often if you hold the D key and V and snap to a corner and then scale, you can get a much more accurate. Let's just line up those corners. Then I can line up the tabletop there, so it's looking good. and then I can scale that way. It's not absolutely perfect. If you hold down the backslash key, you can actually zoom in. Still, like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect. So all we're going to do is collect a shadow, hit backslash again and come out. So this is really clever now. We've got our table and cube tracked nicely, and it just kind of stays with the table the whole time. So a really clever thing we've done there. So we're nearly done with our cube now. I'm going to bring in something else. Let's import an older file. I was working with some Lego stuff, which might be quite fun to work with. So let's have a look for that. Where was I playing with that one? Lego race car, let's bring that in. So this will be huge, so let's just grab the group, scale it down. This particular thing has been, just go into perspective view for this. Turn off the texture, got a default material for now. Scale it down. The good thing about this now is, because that table we know is in the right spot, I can place a little car there. So I'm finally done with that cube now. You've been good to us, but I can even hide you, or I can just delete you. No longer needed. We've replaced with this cool little Lego race car. So like I said, these can be found on Mecha Brick. Link in the description to play around with. So there we have it. So the next step will be to light, texture, shade our assets. You might already have shaded your assets and textured in a different file, but this here actually hasn't been textured, I believe, so we'll go ahead and do that and light it up, and then we'll also give this a Arnold shadow matte to catch the shadows on, and then we'll be able to render the sequence and bring it into Maya, back into Nuke and composite and color correct and get our final composited movie. So I'll see you in the next video.